The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome once again to NDE Radio with me, Lee Witting, whether you're listening by podcast or through the archive of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel. Our guest today, Susanne Seymoure, was gifted with a remarkable near-death experience following a gruesome death at age 12 when she was hung by her scarf from a ski lift rope for some 45 minutes. Amazing as her NDE was, and her miraculous healing from her broken neck and paralysis, her mother asked her not to tell the story for fear she would dwell on her death. Susanne promised her mother she would not tell others about her NDE and kept that promise for 42 years until after her mother's death. It was then she finally wrote the story in her book, My Secrets from Heaven, A Child's Trip to Heaven and Back. But keeping that secret did not interfere with the lessons she learned in heaven, as shown by her calling as an RN. Her 25-year career covered many diversified fields of healing, including clinical nursing instructor, anatomy and physiology instructor, and as a county case manager. Susanne suffered a heart attack shortly after writing her book and was saved yet again on an Easter Sunday, confirming her purpose in telling this story. Susanne, welcome to NDE Radio.
Oh, thank you, Lee. Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Oh, it's a treat for us as well, and yours is an amazing story. Susanne, it becomes easier to understand the promise your mother asked of you when people realize her story is of a family who immigrated from Nazi Germany to the USA after miraculously surviving the Holocaust. They'd finally found a beautiful life here when their daughter suffered, their daughter, you, being you, suffered this horrific accident. And many Americans today have forgotten the horrors of fascism. So tell us a little about your family's danger of hiding Jews while living in Nazi Germany.
Well, in those days, a political party had overtaken the country, and they became your, they burned the books. People just had to obey whatever they said you had to do, and there was just so much around it. It was really a survival mode. And what exactly, Lee, do you want me to pinpoint around that?
Well, they were of a Christian background,
Correct.
I know, was it your grandfather who refused to join the Nazi party?
Yes, they both did. If you refused, they usually executed you. They came to their homes, and they took your family out in the front yard. You could either sign and join, or if you didn't, they executed you. Both of them were engineers, and so they were spared because they were useful. So if they had a use for you, they would use you until there was no longer a use for you. So
right, but the fact that they were engineers meant that they had a skill in configuring ways to hide Jews who would have been executed had they been caught. Of course, they'd have been executed too for hiding the Jews, but to describe a little. I know you don't know a lot about it because they didn't want to talk to you about it, but from what you gathered, how did they hide these Jewish refugees?
Well, I think those will be secrets forever because they were constantly being watched. Your neighbors watched you and reported you. If you were reported as not complying with any type of law that was passed down, or if you questioned anything, you were reported. So neighbors were turning on neighbors. But, if they tried to hide, many people are always trying to do a good thing. I really don't know, to be honest, how my grandfather, I can only imagine because they're very exact, and they're very methodical. So I'm sure they had to think it through with great thought and care because their lives were at risk.
Now, there was another story that I was in your book, and I thought it was really fascinating. Maya was your grandmother, is that right?
Mm-hmm. My mother's mother, yeah, my grandmother.
Your mother's mother. And she was sent to the country because I guess she'd been buried alive under the rubble of her bombed apartment. Is that? No,
they would send the children from the city out into the country, and they were separated from their parents. So my mother was sent out on trains, and they would send them with strangers to live out in the country while the bombings were happening, just to try to keep the children safe. So my grandmother stayed in the city, and she was buried alive there because the buildings were 3 stories of apartments, and she was buried alive. Yeah. They were bombed several times.
But one time as a child, when she wandered into the woods and came across a cat lady.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What you know about that story.
My mother was alone a lot because people were frustrated during the war, and she said, they just left her to be by herself, and no one called her home for dinner or washed her hair or really took care of anyone because it was just a survival mode. So my mother wandered in the woods and often, and one day she wandered pretty far out there and she saw this old shack, and it kind of reminded me of Hansel and Gretel, except inside was an absolutely lovely woman who had many, many, many cats. And it was actually a woman who never had children of her own. So to see this unkempt and orphaned almost kind of child, they became an instant, and there was an instant bond. And yeah, so that was Rosal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they took care of each other. She got to nurture my mom, and my mom got to bring her the joy of having a child in the home.
Yes. And along with at least 100 cats.
And 100 cats. Yeah. Rosal had a lot of cats. She loved company.
Well, I guess we should move on to your family moves to this country, and one day your family decided to go skiing. And you fought with your mom about knotting the scarf around your neck. Yeah. Tell us about that premonition you had.
Oh, it's interesting. I was, as a young girl, I was pretty obedient. I didn't really argue with my mother. She was a strong-natured person and strong disciplinarian. So we were going skiing, and she asked me to put my scarf on, which I did. And then I looped it through once, and she asked me to loop it through again and make a knot. And something in me that was undescribable or unexplainable. Did you ever have a feeling like you just don't want to do it, or you don't want to go, and you don't know why? You just get this strong instinct, and you can't ignore it. So I argued with her. I nicely said no, and then she persisted, yes, no, until she was like, what's the matter with her? And everyone started to notice because we were arguing. And it was going to ruin the day because it was just arguing about it. I tried to stand my ground, but she insisted and said, you're going to ruin the day, and so you better do it. And with force, she exerted her parental force, and so I did comply. But it made me absolutely physically ill, and I thought that was so strange. I can remember every step walking up the driveway and just being so confused as to why I so strongly didn't want that tied. So premonitions are very real for many people.
Yes, and should be heeded when you have when you have them.
Yes.
And as your story is about to show.
Yes.
So
little did we know why.
So this is January 19th, 1975, and you guys go out with your skis, and you come to what looks like a ski lift. It sounded primitive, but go ahead and describe it.
Very primitive, yeah. Well, they lived in a community, and it was a small gated community, and they put up a ski lift, and they don't make them anymore because of all the unsafe features. So it was a tow rope which had a pulley system, and it had gears, and it was just in the gears were housed in a little shack. So we paid attention to that because, of course, my grandfather was there, and he's an engineer, and he went and checked the whole system. And because no one was there, and someone had a maintenance man was locking up because it was the middle of a blizzard. So he was locking up the clubhouse. My mom asked him to please turn on the ski lift, and he did. And he said, just bring the key back when you're done and turn it off. So it was that relaxed of an atmosphere. It wasn't a ski hill that was for public use. And it was just my family there that day. So
okay. And so
here I am with my knot in my scarf in a blizzard on a ski hill.
And you said you say you took hold of this thing, and you felt your head jerk forward with a force.
I took hold of it, and it took hold of me. Yes, we bonded.
Yeah, well, tell how that scarf bonded and what it did to you.
Right. So then the rope was nylon, and it was frayed, and it's just a simple. It was very strong and fast, though. So when you did hang on to it, it did jerk you forward, and it was powerful. So my scarf was hanging. It had fringe, and when I was near the bottom, all of a sudden I noticed the fringe started to get caught in the rope because it spins spirally. So spirally the scarf started wrapping in it, and I really didn't panic. I thought, I can unpeel it, and it just kept going and going. And all of a sudden you start to realize, wow, time is of the essence here. There is an end of the rope and an end of the line. I only have so much time. And before I knew it, it was completely wrapped to where it was so tight, I was getting asphyxiated. And the whole time I was slamming into these posts that held the rope. They were like telephone poles, but metal poles. So my head would hit in each of the poles. And so it was a really good hanging, Lee, and a great way for execution. There was no way out. And at the end of the rope, there was no safety switch. There was no one manning the booth. Nothing. So it was going to be me, and my head going into this little hole that was cut out where the rope enters to go into the gears. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'm either going to be decapitated or I'm going to be smashed into bits when I hit the house where, the little shack. There's no way out. So at that moment, I realized, that my death was right in front of me.
Now, your family's down at the bottom of the hill watching all this happen?
Yeah, we had just finished a long hike, an extensive hike. They didn't bring their skis. We must have trucked through about 3 feet. I guess for my size legs, it felt like 3 feet of snow. Of course, it wasn't that much, but we were good hikers, and we were exhausted. So my parents and my grandparents stayed at the bottom of the hill just to watch my brother and I take a few runs down the hill, if possible. And my brother was behind me, but it was a far way behind me. And right before, I do remember turning around and saying, "Let go." I just didn't want him to witness what I felt was going to happen. Wasn't going to be good.
And your brother, his name's Robert.
Right.
Yes. Said, "I'm coming. Don't worry, Sue. I'm coming."
He tried, he was younger. He saw that I was being violently thrown on the ground and hung and crashing into these poles. And he wanted to desperately do what he could I think he was 9 years old. So.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. He was just a little boy. He was
trying
to save his sister.
So your neck was being crushed, and it was actually broken, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And
all the skin on my neck there was so much friction. I had no skin on my neck, and I had I had two large lumps on both sides of my temples that were the size of baseballs. And just, there was just no reason I really should be alive today. There's no scientific explanation. So, yeah. Scarf came loosely and no one knew how. My grandfather at the bottom of the hill, I remember they saw the scarf. They told me they saw the scarf come flying in a straight line, a perfectly straight line at the top of the rope. How could the scarf have possibly gotten off my neck, go through these gears, and then fly in a perfectly straight line down the hill? And that was what convinced the almighty engineer that he was. He knew that this was something very, very supernatural. He knew there was no explanation. It was impossible for that to happen.
That's right, because
really extraordinary.
It would have had to have decapitated you to do that if it weren't for something else.
Yeah, and the scarf was so tangled, and then the gears would have tangled it further, and it was perfectly straight, like the fringe and everything hung perfectly straight down, like a flag, like a victory flag.
Right.
And that was a sign to them of something. They didn't know what, but they knew that there was something at work that was much bigger than them.
So there you are. You're unconscious at the bottom of the tow rope booth. And then someone approaches you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I remember, okay, so the horror now happened. I don't really know what happened because I must have lost consciousness at some point right before. But I remember laying in the snow and looking over, and there were these beautiful trees, and then here comes this light and warmth, and it felt like a rescue, and it felt like a dad. So I felt that loving father energy. I thought maybe it is my dad. And then the light got brighter and brighter, and I knew when I saw the light, I knew that light was going to save me. I knew that it was going to comfort me. I knew it was coming for me. I knew it came to help me. And I thought it was going to be my family. And there came these hands that reached forward, and he kneeled in front of me, and he just, in all this magnificent glory, I got to see, and he let me know who he was, and he said he was Jesus, and it was kind of telepathic too, where everything about him was communicated to me in a moment. Everything you need to know, every question you have is answered through his eyes in a moment. And for me, his hands were just so important because they held me. And in that embrace, I felt like everything would be all right. And it really was. And with him came two angels. I didn't know what to call them because they were males. And later in life, people would talk about angels, and they always talked about females with these beautiful iridescent colors. And these were two male looking, and they almost looked like warriors. They had like shielded breast shields on or something, and they had like work. And I thought they looked like work boots, but they were some sort of a boot, and they looked just very, very strong. And I couldn't and one was tall, one was short. And I remember as they walked towards me, one was tripping a little bit, and the other one was almost like he had his shoelaces untied. And so and they made me giggle. They made me giggle because they were just so disarming. Even though they looked so powerful, they were very disarming. I actually had the time of my life meeting all of them. So
you said you thought one was at least 10 feet tall?
Yeah, I mean, I tried in my book to describe for people as best I could. And so 10 feet to me means larger than a normal human. much larger than a normal human, somewhere in there. I would say, I mean, not giant, like 20 feet, but it was like about 10 feet.
Uh-huh. And did Jesus look like the image that, is popular of Jesus with the long brown hair?
I thought he looked, yeah. There's many pictures of Jesus, and I hadn't seen any as far as like what the typical Jesus would look like, because he wasn't really part of our home at all. So, who I saw later, when I did see pictures, sometimes I see a picture and it really resembles who I saw. It was more like I saw him first, and then later I saw pictures.
Do you remember his eyes?
The first thing I noticed, Lee, to be honest, was the love that came from his eyes and the light and the feeling that his eyes gave me. But his eyes were the most gorgeous eyes because of that love. And his hands just, and I think about hands and how we use hands to shake hands and hug, and hands are so important, and we can hurt people with our hands. And just his hands were so extraordinarily, they just transmitted so much safety and peace and warmth and home. And it was just something I can't even, it's very hard to describe. It was magnificent. In your book, you say his hands connected with every cell in my body. Everything. That's every cell in my body. Every cell. And they carry like information in that love. There's information while he's touching you, while he's holding you. It goes so quickly. You get this blast of, I did. I got this blast of information of all about him, all about myself, that he knew everything about me, everything about my family. Everything was connecting. Everything was just one. It was like one big ball of information, questions, everything you just knew everything was connected. There were answers for everything. There was reasons for everything. It was just this brilliance that came through his hands. And you knew he understood every single thing about you. And yeah, every cell in my body, I feel like right down to your DNA was touched. It was magnificent. It was like, I was so excited to tell. And here I was, a bloody mess afterwards. And probably my neck was probably twisted, and my limbs in places that were, like Gumby, like a rubber doll. But I just couldn't stop the joy that I had from that. There was so much joy. It was baffling when they found me. They were, who are you talking to? My mother said, I heard someone talking to her. And and my mother said, why are you so happy? They just, and they knew because the scar flying down gave them a heads up, and they knew. And yet the terror of it for them was something they just couldn't get past.
Yeah, it took them some 45 minutes to get to you, didn't it?
Right. We sort of timed it out because when I wrote the story, I had to find a way to describe everything. And so I actually went back to the hill, and I brought a measuring tapes, and we tried to show how many steps it takes to go up the hill from the bottom, and then include the snow. And of course, here comes my science and my engineering family. And we try to figure it all out. We estimated about, for them to get to the top of the hill, it would have been about 45 minutes, no earlier. So I always gave times or measurements, the minimal. So
one of the things that struck me when I was in your book, you described the wings of the angels like big, soft beds.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Like a down comforter, the feather beds. And I think, gosh, when I came back, I thought, do we really remember angels when we made feather beds? the angel's wings were truly, but they were strong. So, but it had a feather-like quality that felt soft. Everything felt comforting, just comforting. Everything about them was comfort and joy and tremendous peace and lots of information. Not sure about the information part, but I remember that. Is there going to be a quiz? I don't know, but there was a lot of inpouring. You're like an open vessel, and they take a funnel and they just funnel in so much information and everything. And I really believe that dismisses any kind of fear or, and especially for a child, I think. For me, I really knew that Jesus loved children. I could tell he knew exactly how to approach, and I never was scared. I was never frightened. I was extremely at peace with him. So,
one of the things that struck me about the whole near-death experience that you described was designed. I believe that all of these are very personalized. And for a 12-year-old, it was probably a perfect introduction to heaven with great comfort and great empathy and compassion. So,
yeah.
You said that Jesus and his angels were like a team. Describe what that was about.
They just seemed like they were friends, like best friends. They came together. I knew that Jesus was there, that they had this great respect and regard for him. You could see he was the leader and in this light. He had this tremendous light, and you knew that they had a purpose with him. It was their job or mission, like a hierarchy almost. So you just knew they worked together. He brought them with him. And the three of them, were he was the one who greeted me and actually held me, and they came and they just stayed. It was just like we were this little group. It was nice. It's really nice.
And then Jesus said he was going to take you home.
Yeah. He was, and I remember when he said, "Take me home," and I thought we were going to go to my grandma's house. and my grandma and I always watched Mod Squad and the FBI, and that was our show. And so I thought, we're gonna go. And I remember, he said home, but there was this like he just made it feel like everyday life, except it was the safety was amazing. And so he took me home, and I gotta say, Lee, I remember, I can really see how there comes a point where you don't look back. You just look forward. And I hit that point, and then right before, I started to not look back anymore and just look forward to going with him where we were going and no longer looking back. And then I heard this horrible screaming, and it sort of shocked me out of my bliss, and I looked down and I saw my mother at the bottom of the hill. And so that sort of set me on a different trajectory, because then I realized that my leaving would cause great pain for them. And it was, I was really torn between that. And so that was difficult.
You say in your book, your mother was running around in circles like a chicken with her head cut off, holding her hands on top of her head.
She looked so silly.
And screaming.
And screaming. And she lost it. When we got to the hospital, she actually was given medication to calm her down. She was hysterical. Once we finally reached the hospital, she held it together till we got there. And then she And I was in complete composure, and they just couldn't figure it out because I'm smiling and having conversations, and they're all just looking at me like, what kind of endorphins or what is going on here?
Yeah.
And then once they saw my injuries, they knew there was no scientific reason. So, and it happened to be a Catholic hospital because we were in Pennsylvania and there were no hospitals where we were. There was no 911, no cell phones. So they had to drive me with a volunteer car all the way to New York. And when they got to New York, that was a long drive. They didn't have a siren or anything. I just laid in the back seat of a car. And when we got there, the stretchers came and there was lots of a big fuss. I just wanted to get home to watch Mod Squad with my grandma and FBI and find my dog, Heidi. And that's how good I felt, Lee. That's how that's how complete he returned me in completely fine. I mean, I came back fine. And
do you recall any of the physical transportation? Because in the meantime, you're up in the air with Jesus. Were you at both locations? Do you feel like you had bilocated? Do you have any memory of the physical body being transferred to New York?
That happened after he returned me to my body.
I got you.
So
okay.
I was up I was up with him in at home.
Oh, that's right. He returns you to that same place at the top of the hill.
Yeah, he returns me, and that's where he said some things to me, and I remember speaking with him, and we said we sort of said our goodbyes, and my mother had heard because they were almost to the top of the hill. He waited until they came, and then he left, and my mom said, "Who were you talking to?" And who was talking to you? I heard a voice here. And then they all looked at her like, you have to be careful when you say things like that because you worry. She's like, I heard a voice here. And people, everyone in the family was like, did she? And I'm saying, yes, he did. And they just really thought I would be dead when they saw me. They came to the top of the hill to find a corpse because there was no escaping that ski, the ending of the tow rope. There was no escaping.
But while you were lying there, I guess before they got to you, you saw heaven. Yes.
Yeah. So when I hit, when he came with the two angels, then he carried me to heaven, and there I had an amazing experience while they were trying to come get me. So that was really the 45 minutes of. Yeah. That I can account for in human time, in earth time, in real time. So they were trying to get to the top of the hill. It took them about 45 minutes. I was probably gone for that long, as far as we can tell by the counting of the steps. So there I went to heaven, and I had this phenomenal experience there.
What did you see?
Well, when we got there, it looked like I saw a big tree. I remember this really, really cool big tree. And we went to the tree and we sat down under it. And then I sat on his lap and we were sitting there. And then came like a group to greet us. I want to say, I call them a council. I didn't know a word at 12 years old. So it was a group of beings. They looked official. They looked like they were loving, but they asked questions. They were coming to take me somewhere. And I just kept asking if I could go home to my family, my mom and dad. I was worried, and they kept putting me at ease. And they tried to convince me there was nothing to worry about. Everything was taken care of and everyone would be okay. And it was this sort of really quick back and forth of, why isn't she staying? Like they expected me to want to stay, and they were confused as to why I wanted to return. it wasn't expected. I could see that there was like a question. They just thought it would be an easy transition. And I sort of put a kink in the chain when I said no. And that surprised me, and it surprised them. But in that experience, Lee, I learned how much they listened to me. They could hear my heart. They could hear what I was feeling, what I was thinking, what I wanted. And they didn't dismiss it. They really took the time to figure out, what do we do next? How do we work with this within their system? And they did take the time. And then they reached a point where they seemed like, I remember thinking, they don't have the answer, because they were in a circle and they just kept chatting. And then another group came in more and more, but that was a whole thing. So
you said, I think at first you estimated about 50 beings, and then it turned into more like 100. Yeah.
And if you ever stood on the top of a mountain and look out, and you can see the land like farmland, and it seems like you can see for miles. And yes. So we went to this place called High Rock, I think it's called. And I tried to describe in the book what heaven looked like to me. And when I stood on this rock, I could see for miles. I said to my husband, how far is that? He said, probably 30 miles. So I said, well, that's how heaven looked to me. So I described that. And these beings came from towns, different towns, and they came to assist each other in following some sort of law, like some sort of order that, some sort of perfect decision-making process. And so they gathered, and they kept gathering and gathering until they came to the right answer. And I realized that's how much your free will is, now later in life, I see how much your free will is honored and listened to and examined and assisted. So they tried to do everything they could to make this right for everyone. And at the end of the day, there wasn't an answer. And then they looked really miffed. And I remember thinking, oh my, I'm really causing problems here. And it was just this process. And I remember then they woke up. Well, along came this being that was, he had me study his face. I had no idea who he was. And it was very chiseled, and he was an older man, and he looked really grumpy. He looked like if you wake him up, you really better know why. And so he was like an elder, and he let me know an age to him for some reason. And I think it was connected to wisdom. So he was somehow in charge of wisdom and knowledge. And he showed me lots of things, buildings of things that housed. I thought they were books and films. It was like recorded information. I don't know how to translate that at 12. So through my life, it looked like universities or some sort of, it was just some sort of housing of records. And it was to let me know, that things have a system, and they were going to do everything they could to make sure the right things were done. And how, and for me, because of what I was expressing, it was just a real collaboration.
So this being took you on a tour.
Yeah, he took me on a tour, and I think it was to buy time, to be honest. He was buying some time, and I think he was a little irritated. He had to wake up. And I know they joked a lot when I was there, and there was humor. There was lots of humor, and the humor was, waking him up was like just waking up a grumpy old bear. Like, you better know what. Like, no one wanted to wake him. And so they were like, can't we figure this out? Like, do we really have to go wake up the supervisor? Like, you don't want to have to do that. And I always got that same feeling as a nurse when you have to call the doctor. You try everything you can before you have to call the doctor. So you try and you do your best with what your parameters are. So they had parameters. That's the correct word. So he gave me a tour before returning, and then I got to meet. I came back with Jesus, and then at that time, they really had no decision, and it was exhausting. I remember it was kind of comical because they were like, what do we do now? And they wanted to hide the fact that they were saying, what do we do now? Mm. So at the end, they had to contact, they went to contact. And again, it was this like, who's going to go? Like, who wants to be the one to have to go do this? Because we couldn't handle it. So they did go. And that's when I saw this, gorgeous golden light. And through this golden light came a big, giant, it was another hand, almost like an arm. It just reached. I don't know if it was actually a hand, but the golden light felt like one because it reached. And when that light reached, that light had wisdoms that were the ultimate wisdom. Like, you knew everyone was so relieved because here came the real wisdom, the superior, the all-knowing. And then that touched Jesus and then myself. And it was all connected. So, you talk about oneness, and so Jesus and that light were connected. And so they were one. But it was a beautiful demonstration for me to see that golden light. And when I see gold, I still think of that golden light. And then I knew whatever that answer was, it was going to be the right answer. I knew they took the time, and they went to the top. They went to the top of the hierarchy. And then with that, I was returned. But I was told it would be difficult. And I was told, they were really concerned. They never talked down to me. They never made me feel as a child that they never made me feel they were superior to me or nothing like that. They were collaborative. It was just this intelligence and collaboration and love all blended together. Everything you would think you need for the recipe of a perfect decision. And in that came the decision, and they were sad for me, they were worried for me, and they were concerned, and they escorted me back. And
they did warn you that you might have to endure a terrible pain.
And they were just kept saying, are you sure, sweetheart? Are you sure? Do you really, it's going to be so painful. And they were just so, but they were honoring me in the same time in what I was choosing. And so they did return me. And of course, I always knew that it was not my choice alone. I felt like it's the decisions are part of a bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And I knew there was a big picture, and each of us is just a piece of it. So I didn't know exactly why, but I knew it was a gift. Even though I would be in pain, I felt like they gave me a great gift. And
there's a line in your book that I really loved. They said I was a sweetheart. I heard the word sweetheart several times. The communication was like music without lyrics, speaking without words. It was like looking in someone's eyes and seeing their souls and understanding it completely. I thought that was terrific.
That's the words. When I wrote, I was always in seclusion, and I always asked for guidance for words, and because words are so hard to match to the experience, and they always gave me the words. Because, Lee, I was not a writer. I didn't even write a Christmas card or birthday cards. That wasn't terrible. My father would always say, well, just pick up our birthday cards because she's never going to write them or send them. And so writing for me was an effort. and I was helped when I asked for guidance and instruction how to write. And it really came out, I thought the book came out like a sort of just like a good old campfire story that you can read really quickly. And I wanted people to be able to just get what they needed. You can even just read one chapter and that'll have what you might be interested in. That to me was brilliant, and on the part of the guidance I got, that I received.
So then Jesus returns you at that point.
Yeah. Yes.
And you said you were lying there on your side in a pool of blood. Describe.
Yes, I remember
that.
when he returned me, because it's such an event when you re-enter your physical body, and I didn't really know there was a separation until when I returned. I just knew that I could sense that it was very cold. The snow all of a sudden was starting to make me shiver. And I looked, and my eyes were able to open, and I looked at the snow. And then I could see all the blood, and there was so much blood. When I got to the hospital, they took my shirt, they cut it off, and they literally wrung it out. It was a long sleeve turtleneck, and they wrung it out in the sink several times. That's how much blood I had lost. And
wow.
And I remember then recognizing the physical, and they told me, they said, don't be afraid, but you're going to have pain, and it's not going to be easy. And, cause they can't promise, here. I feel like, they were honest, and I did have pain. I mean, even after my experience, I did not live a life that didn't include pain and suffering. I mean, that's part of, the journey, and they let me know, and they felt sad that was going to happen. Little did I know they sort of dropped another gift, which was a spontaneous healing. And so I didn't know what to call that at 12 years old. And I just knew everyone called me a miracle when I got to the hospital. The nuns, it was a Catholic hospital, and the nuns came in like a sea of nuns. I'm not kidding, Lee. I couldn't even see the end of the hallway. And they just all came in, and they wanted to put this plaque up in commemoration of the miracle at Bon Secours Hospital. And they came. And so because my mother hushed me not to talk about it before we got there, in the car on the ride there, she said, shh, because I was so euphoric. I wanted to jabber about it all day long. Oh, she said, no. And, stay quiet. And also, then I quickly got a sense of it's not safe somehow to talk about. It made me pause, and I trusted her, so I didn't. But then the nuns came and confirmed everything for me, because they knew that, it's a miracle. And so for me, it integrated it very quickly, because I got to know. I was like, they know these things happen, and I was like, oh, they know. And so miracles for me became special and everywhere. And I just pay attention to them more, and I enjoy them more. And so that was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. You wrote, when I returned, my mother really had to guard me because my heart was so innocently wide open and unprotected.
Oh, yeah.
I trusted that everyone was good.
I did for most of my life, Lee. I slip and I fall back to that a lot, and I could get myself killed doing it. So, but I remember my mother was constantly, I would give away my toys. I would give away my belongings. If someone said, I like that, here, it's yours. I thought we're all one, we're all connected. Everyone knows each other's feelings and thoughts, like I had felt there. There's this perfect understanding. And I just thought people can read each other so effortlessly. I didn't know how to separate from that. it was because the beings I had met, everyone understood everyone so effortlessly. Everyone spoke to each other, knowing your intentions and your heart and your thoughts and your whole full self. And so I always get frustrated here, as a child, how much time we spend on saying, did I say that correctly? You hope the person understands you correctly. Did I use the right words? You apologize, hoping your apology's correct. It's so frustrating after having an experience like that, where that we can instantly see and feel what the other person or the other being is thinking and feeling. So that was a struggle for me, and a heartache, a terrible heartache. I had to figure that out on my own, how to fit in. I had to find and I was going into teenage years where, it was very turbulent. How do you fit in? So,
right.
Different world.
What an experience.
Yeah, it was, Lee. It changed my life.
You devote a whole chapter in your book to the light, describing the light. And it's really lovely.
Yeah.
And then you go on and say, the being I will always know to be Jesus had extraordinary love that blended with the light and made it shine. Love is the light.
It's just so connected. Everything's so connected and unforgettable, because even though I was hushed and even though I didn't have the experience I didn't find anyone else who had a near-death experience in my lifetime as far as a discussion with them until after I wrote my story in seclusion. I didn't ever know there was others, except once in a while patients I knew patients had experiences when they had trauma from surgery or accidents. So I just was in seclusion and wrote my story. And after I did, all kinds of doors opened up. And here I am speaking with you and meeting so many others and so many people that have had extraordinary experiences with the light. And I always love to hear about it.
I'm so glad that you're joining the group of us who've talked about these experiences, because if enough people heard these stories and realized their truth, we could change the world. The beauty that you saw in heaven, the 30 miles of view we have here on earth, if we would only treat it right and treat one another right.
Right. And every now and then you see big glimpses of it, or you see the light shining through others. You see people that are so inspirational, or even when you see a child that's born and they play the piano like a concert pianist, and you wonder, how did that happen? Or just so many different, but actually being on your program feels very much to me. I hope you accept this as a compliment, but it feels very much to me like when I was with Jesus and I met people that were very accepting and loving. So I feel like when I meet other experiencers, I get to get that piece of heaven connection. And in that, it's so relaxing and rewarding, in the sense of knowing that there's others who are trying to let that light shine. It's important. It's important.
Well, it's you become
helpful,
really aware of it when you go to one of these in-person IANDS conferences. It's a terrible disappointment to do it on Zoom compared to being in a room with maybe 200 people who've had a near-death experience.
Wow.
It's very
I have yet to experience that, so I'm really looking forward to it. I really am looking forward to it. It's so exciting to me to think of what that might be like.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for telling this story. And you did receive a message, you say in the book, lovingly share this with others, which you've just done, and anyone's life you touch will only benefit from it. And I can't help but agree that that is true.
I hope everyone shares their stories. I think our true stories are the most important thing to share, because we can all benefit and learn from each other and light each other's light. I know many times my light gets dim in life when I have hardships, and there's always someone that comes along and lights that light again. And it's just a wonderful thing. So thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful experience. I'm
for
so
me,
happy to know
me too.
you.
It's good to know you too, Susanne.
I'll try to keep my boundaries. I'm sending you a big hug.
That's
Thank
fine.
you for having me. I'm still 12 years old sometimes when I tell the story, because I get to keep that childlike piece of me through it, and it's really something. So I hope it helps others, Lee. I hope anyone who listens knows how loved they are, and that you really are listened to and cared for perfectly.
Thank you. It's because of people like you that this show is a success. Well, listen, my thanks to you, Susanne Seymoure, for sharing the amazing story of your childhood NDE. And if folks would like to find your book, My Secrets from Heaven, or find out more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My book is on Amazon, My Secrets from Heaven. It's on Amazon. And I'm a very accessible person, so that's where it is. In my story, I knew the reason I wrote a book was I knew that was probably a good way for people to read about it privately at home. It's a quick read, and I thought they can gain quickly from it if you're in the bathtub or you. I know the other day I had a really tough day, and sometimes you just gain strength from grabbing a hold of something that might add more light to your life and more inspiration or more insight or more comfort. It's really comforting.
Yes.
And the comfort, we just can't get enough in this world of comfort. So we got to comfort each other.
Well, especially in
sometimes
these times of COVID and other natural and unnatural disasters.
Natural and unnatural. And so the one thing we do have is we do have our ability to have compassion and love and kindness. And that's so healing and so invigorating too.
Thank you
for having me.
If listeners would like to hear this show again, or any of our more than 400 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site, hit the past shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to like, follow, and share our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.